Hi everyone, it's Rax, starting all of my build guides for Season 27, and what better one to start with than what I think is going to be pound for pound the very best build next season. Wave of Light is the strongest build, and the Tal Rasha with the changes, we're going to have to try it next week, might be incredible. But pound for pound, I think the Strafe Impale Demon Hunter is probably overall the best. It's a godly starter build, it's a godly farming build, which I'm going to show you some footage of in a second. It is very good for solo pushing, and it is one of the absolute best RGKs, which is a Rift Guardian killer for metas. You can do everything with this build. You could play it the entire season and dominate. You can play solo. You can be invited to groups. And the cool thing is this build is only going to work this season. So this is your only chance to play it. So you got to try it. It's like a super god DH. Let's get into it. So the first thing that we need to understand is, why is this build only available in Season 27? In Season 27, you're going to get Angelic Crucibles, which are going to let you upgrade an item that has Primal Ancient stats, along with one of 3 superpowers for each class. One of the superpowers for Demon Hunters is Strafe now cast the last non-channeled hatred spending ability that you've cast. So what that means is you can throw an Impale and then start strafing, and Strafe is going to throw your impales. This is extremely powerful, and there are a few ways to play this. You can play this with the Fire Rune, which is what I'm going to recommend that you do, and you primarily just look for the elites. You go for the elites and you murder them, and you just move on with your life. Or if you want to play a little bit more of a strategic style, you can play Cold when you're solo pushing and try to line up a huge room of stuff and try to use Overpen, which shoots all the way through them. I tried them both on the PTR, and I thought that I would like the Cold Rune much better, but that is not what happened. I thought that the Chemical Burn with the fire was a lot better, so that's what I'm going to recommend that you play. So now let's look at the Shadow set, which makes this work. So the 2-piece gives you 6,000% increased damage when you have a melee weapon equipped. We're going to have Strafe Point, which is one of the easiest weapons to craft in the game, which is amazing. So we get free 6,000% damage. Shadow Power gains the effect of every rune and lasts forever. Press it once, forget about it. Beautiful. And Impale deals an additional 75,000% weapon damage to the first enemy hit, and then 25,000 to subsequent enemies. Impale does 1,000,000 damage. We throw an Impale. This season we Strafe, and Strafe is going to throw our Impales everywhere. For the weapon, we have Strafe Point, and this is very critical to understand. You must know this. Whenever you upgrade a weapon, a dagger in particular, with Recipe 3 in the cube, there are only 2 choices for a Demon Hunter: Lord Greenstone's Fan and Strafe Point. 50% of the time, you're going to get a Strafe Point. So whenever you get materials, you need to be constantly upgrading daggers over and over and over. Farm, farm, farm. Upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. There is no reason that you shouldn't have an amazing Strafe Point. It's one of the easiest items to craft in the game. Use Recipe 3, upgrade daggers all season. In fact, most of you should have a Primal Ancient. So we're not going to use our Angelic Crucible on Strafe Point. That would be a big mistake. Use it on the Holy Point shot. It's much harder to get a good Holy Point shot, and you're going to have an amazing one. So we want percent damage, dex, and area damage. So in general, area damage does help this build, especially when you're playing the cold version, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that. I would recommend that you play the fire version where you're mostly elite hunting. If you're mostly elite hunting, then that means area damage does help, especially for solo pushing, but not quite as much. So you're going to see we're going to make some choices, like on rings, for example, where for our third roll, instead of getting area damage, I think it's better to take average damage. Onto the Holy Point shot, use your Angelic Crucible on Holy Point shot unless you magically find an amazing one, because these are very, very hard to roll. We want fire damage, attack speed, crit, area damage, and Impale if you can get all of that. And then we obviously need the Strafe now cast last channeled hatred spending ability. You must have that power or this build does not work at all. For the boots, we want Dex, Vitality, All Resist, and Impale damage. Pants, Dex, Vite, All Resist. We're going to sock it with diamonds so we can stay alive. This build is a little bit squishy, so if you want to throw some extra survivability rolls here and there, or take some survivability passives or maybe an extra gem, that's totally fine. For the rings, we use Focus and Restraint. whenever you use a hatred spending ability and a hatred generating ability. You get 50% damage for each one, and they're multiplicative with each other. So that gives you 1.25 damage. So that's why Focus and Restraint are godly whenever you can use them. So we're going to use Bolas as our generator, and we're going to use Strafe as our spender. And we're going to have them up pretty much all the time. You just hold Strafe, and you just press Bola once every 5 seconds, and you got both buffs up forever. Take Bane of the Trapped, so we can do increased damage, and we want crit average damage. I think that's better than area damage, unless you're playing the Cold Rune. On the Restraint that we just covered, we're going to take Teguk. You get 8% increased damage whenever you spend a resource on a channeled skill. Well, that's like Strafe. We're channeling it all the time. Stacking up to 10 for 80%, and then we get 2% armor for each stack as well to stay alive. For the belt, we want Witching Hour, Dex, Vite, attack speed, and crit hit damage. And here is where I'll explain. We used to take the Guardian set. The Guardian set was the obvious choice, but Blizzard, I guess you could say, nerfed it. They took the 2-piece power, which is what we wanted, and moved it to the 3-piece, and they moved the 3-piece to the 2-piece. Now it doesn't make much sense to take the Guardian set. So now our choices are, do we either take Augilds here and drop our COE for a Ring of Royal Grandeur, or do we take Wraps of Clarity and keep our COE, which is like 50% damage? They're both extremely close, and you can do either way with whatever you're doing, solo pushing, speeds, whatever. I think you can mix and match them pretty interchangeably. I think the Wraps of Clarity and the COE is going to give you a little bit more survivability and a little bit more planning, right? So you're going to deal all of your damage in fire, so it's going to give you an opportunity to bring everyone close together and then nuke them down around those elites, because we're going to be hunting for them. But then if you go to the other setups, I think it's just better just to go with Augilds and get that consistent damage. Either way, you can go with either setup, no matter what you want to do. But it's too bad that they nerfed the Guardian set, because before we were taking the Guardian's belt. For the gloves, we want the quads, crit, area damage, and cooldown reduction. Remember, we are going to have Vengeance with a Dawn. That means we need roughly 38% total CDR on our character in order to be able to keep up our Vengeance permanently, which is a requirement. So we need 38% total CDR, and I think 8, the Diamond, and then if you take an Enchantress, that's good enough to keep it up forever. On the shoulders, we want Dex, All Res, or Vitality, area damage and cooldown. Chest, Dex, Vite, All Resist, or you could get % life instead of All Resist, or you could get reduced elite damage. All those are good. And then you want diamonds in the sockets to stay alive. And then for the helmet, Dex, Crit, Impale damage are the best rolls, with a diamond for more cooldown. We need that to keep our Vengeance up. Squirt's necklace with fire, crit, and a lot of people say, Rax, why do you take a Squirt's necklace, especially when you're solo pushing? You're never going to keep that buff up, so why take it and just take extra damage? Remember, when you're solo pushing, you're trying to set a personal best, right? Well, on a lot of bosses, hopefully you can dodge their attacks, especially since you're always moving around. And the reason why you take Squirt's necklace is for shield pylons. If you get a shield pylon with a flavor of time on your follower, you essentially get 2 minutes of double damage. You have to take that risk, especially in softcore, and play with Squirt's necklace. Last but not least, we have the Wraps of Clarity. Whenever we shoot our Bola, we're going to get 50% reduced damage for 5 seconds. We have to keep this up to stay alive. Remember, you don't have to play Wraps of Clarity. You could play Augilds if you want and take a Ring of Royal Grandeur. It's up to you. Fire, Dex, Vit, and Crit would be the ideal rolls. Now for the skills. Vengeance, Dark Heart, like almost every Demon Hunter build takes this. It's going to give you major damage, and it's going to give you 50% damage reduction. Shadow Power, remember, from the 4-piece, we get all the runes, and it stays up forever. Press it once with any rune, and you get them all forever. Smokescreen Displacement is really, really good, and this is how you're going to use your discipline. The build is not that fast, so the 100% movement speed from displacement is invaluable, and also that momentary invulnerability is super useful as well, because the build is kind of squishy. We obviously have to take Impale. You have to throw one of them in the beginning and then hold Strafe for the rest of the time. So Impale Chemical Burn is what I would recommend. It's more of elite hunting. If you want to play, if you want to make huge packs, try the Cold Rune. I tried them both. I think the fire one is better. Bola's Bitter Pill You can take this or you can take the freezing one. The reason why I like Bitter Pill is it pretty much gives you infinite discipline so you can smoke screen all the time. But if you want to take Freezing Strike, you can take that one as well. And finally, Strafe, take Drifting Shadows so you can move around freely. Steady Aim is just going to give us more damage as long as we're not right up next to them. Cold of the Week is going to increase our damage against slow or chilled enemies. Ambush gives us more damage. And this final one is kind of up to you. You could take a Cheat Death, especially in hardcore. It's a very good idea. The reason why Thrill of the Hunt is a decent idea is because we do more damage to enemies that are slowed or chilled from Cold of the Week. And Bane of the Trapped only gives us an aura that's within 15 yards, but then at the same time, we have to be 10 yards away to get steady aim. So it's very hard to rely on having perfect positioning with the aura of Bane of the Trapped combined with steady aim. So Thrill of the Hunt kind of solves that problem for you by always slowing them. At the same time, it makes it very hard to kite, but that also kind of doesn't matter because we're elite hunting. So a lot of things going on here. Thrill of the Hunt is an option. You could take a Cheat Death, but I think it's going to be actually a little bit more difficult to get your full damage multipliers out there if you don't take this. In the cube, we have Dawn. This is what allows us to have our permanent vengeance. We'll take Mantle of Channeling. We're always spinning around, so we're going to get increased damage and more reduced damage, which we desperately need. And we're going to take COE to get massive damage in the fire cycle. Again, if you want, you can take Ring of Royal Grandeur here and swap these two out and take Awe Guilds. So let's say you're not solo pushing. What would you change if you were doing speed GRs? And the answer is almost nothing. You'd take a Molten Wildebeest Gizzard instead of your Taguk, because this is going to help you keep up your squirts permanently. And I think it'd be a lot better to take Awe Guilds and Ring of Royal Grandeur in this situation because you want that consistent damage. You don't want to arrive to an elite that you want to snipe very quickly, have to wait the entire time for your fire rotation to come through. This consistent elite damage, I think, will serve you much better. And then here you can take a passive like Hot Pursuit to move around faster. And I think other than that, it's exactly the same. And now for Rift Guardian killing, we can do something a little bit different. We can drop our generator and pick up Wolf Companion for extra damage. Since we don't have a generator, Raps of Clarity doesn't work, so we'll take Awe Guilds again for increased elite damage. And since we don't have a generator, we only get half of our Focus and Restraint, so Focus and Restraint are out, so we can take COE along with a Stone of Jordan. And this is going to give us, again, massive, massive elite damage because our only job is to kill the boss at the end. And of course, remember, if you're going to kill the boss, you've got to take Bane of the Stricken to build up your Stricken stacks. But honestly, if you're a really, really powerful demon hunter, you might be able just to slaughter him without Stricken. That's how good of a boss killer this is. It's one of the best in the entire game. And one final thing, when you're doing boss killing, don't forget to take the single out passive. Just gives you a free 25% crit. Now let's look at the Paragon Points. In core, you'd put it into movement speed first, then you'd put enough into vitality to feel comfortable to stay alive, and then you should pump the rest into dexterity. Unless I'm missing something, you should never need maximum hatred or have any problems with it, so you shouldn't need to put any points in there. For offense, you want cooldown reduction first, because remember, if you can't keep your vengeance up, you're going to die. So take that first, then take crit hit damage, then crit hit chance, and finally attack speed. Attack speed kind of sucks, because when you use Strafe, it's the same as the God DH. It just doesn't really help you that much. For defense, we'll take all res first, then life, then armor and life per second. And finally, in the utility category, we're going to go area damage, and then life on hit, and then pickup radius, and finally resource cost reduction. You shouldn't have any resource problems at all. All right, well, that's the guide. I have posted a lot of high clears already on my channel, so let's jump into some speed farm footage and let's see how good it is and why I think it's pound for pound probably the best build you could possibly play next season. Alrighty, let's see this build in action doing 120s at 2,500 Paragon. To solo farm 120s efficiently is insane. I think it's going to be pretty much the highest for any build in the game, pending how good Tal Rasha is. The only one that can go higher than this is the Wave of Light Monk. Remember, the Wave of Light Monk requires very, very good gear, and you have to play well. This build is so easy to play. Anybody can do this. All you do is spin around and hold Strafe, and you press your bola once every 5 seconds. That's it. 1 impale at the beginning, 1 shadow power at the beginning, spam your vengeance and your smoke screen, hold strafe the whole time, press bola once every 5 seconds. I don't know how that sounded to you, if that sounded like a lot, but I promise you, it's nothing. It's one of the easiest builds to play. And you can see that we're just throwing impales everywhere and just pretty much destroying. It's a beautiful thing. And if you're up against one boss and you're wondering, should I stay far away to get like my steady aim, or should I give him a hug to try to like do as much damage as possible? It's way more damage to hit them with all the impales than to play at a distance. So whenever you have the choice, go up and give the elites a hug. But as you can see, it's like the God DH, but easier to play, and it does more damage. It's a little bit slower, and it's definitely squishier, but more damage and easier to play. I mean, we'll take that trade-off all day long. And you can see I have just erased this 120. There really isn't another build except Wave of Light that can do this easily at this Paragon level. Again, we'll see how Tal Rasha ends up. It's not going to be Tal Rasha anyway. It's going to be LOD Meteor with the way that Blizzard has set it up. We'll have to see how powerful that is. But look at the boss. Oh, and now you see him. Now you don't. Erased. I mean, does this look? If this looks fun to you next season to power up all of your characters, then this is what you should do. You can see in that inventory right there, you see I'm wearing the Guardian set. That's before they nerfed it. So there's no more of that. But you see I've got my Sanctified Holy Point shot there because that's by far the hardest thing to craft. So let's jump in and do one more. That was a 2.5 minute 120. And let's see how we do this next one. So you need to turn on your shadow power and throw 1 impale in the beginning. Spam your vengeance and your smoke screen. Hold strafe and press bola once every 5 seconds. One thing that I have a terrible habit of is I am so used to playing the God DH where you keep having to fire your hungering arrow over and over and over and over, like once a second to keep your stacks up. You absolutely do not need to do that in this build. Instead, you just need to press it once every 5 seconds, kind of metronomically or periodically, right? So my biggest mistake is I overpress bola. So I think it's going to be very hard for somebody to play both the God DH and this build in the same season because they just do the same thing but have very different timings. I don't know, it really, really confused me. And between the two builds, this one is just far superior. Plus, I'm going to say this one more time. This is the only season where you're probably going to ever be able to play this. Because the only reason that you can play this is because of the sanctified power. Unless Blizzard decides to keep it in the game, which I'm guessing won't happen. But you never know. If it becomes a fan favorite, if enough people cry about it on the forums, maybe. But I wouldn't count on it. So this is your only chance to play this. Just keep that in mind. In fact, I'll probably have to take this guide down at the end of Season 27 because people are going to be like, Rax, how do I play that really cool build that you showed? Well, you can't. Sorry. This is what I'm going to play. I'm starting DH so I can play this game. I'm not just saying I think this is pound for pound the best, then debate and do something different. Unless LOD Meteor turns out to be way better than this, which it might. It sounds pretty crazy on paper. And if Blizzard decides to keep with the way that they've gone, I think it's either this Wave of Light or LOD Meteor for the top 3. I really like this build because, as a streamer, I like to play a very chill build. That way I can talk to chat, right? It's very fun to play a very active build, a very challenging build when you're pushing and you're putting forth all of your effort. But when you have to farm your Paragon, you have to farm all of your items, to me, ease of play makes a huge difference. And I'm telling you, you will never play an easier build than this. So it's got to be one of the easiest builds to play in the game. Here we go with the boss. You already know what's going to happen. Going to get erased out of existence. I really hope you guys like this guide. Leave me some feedback in the comments if you have any, and I'll see you in Season 27. Godly build. You got to try this, I'm telling you.